Hello, my name is Tony Barkham, and I'm here today to present you with conditionals and obligation. Let's start with obligation. So what is obligation? Well, obligation is a must. You know that when you're on an airplane, before takeoff, you must fasten your seat belts, and during the flight, you must not smoke. That's very clear, and that's exactly what the Federal Aviation Administration say from the United States Department of Transportation. They say must is the only word that imposes a legal obligation on your readers to tell them something is mandatory. Must is the only word. Now, I looked at PricewaterhouseCoopers auditor training in Australia, and they say modern legislation here in Australia tends to use the word must, meaning you have to do something, because if you don't, you're breaking the law. That's also very clear. And what you see now is in Australia, New Zealand, the United States, and many other English-speaking countries, the tendency is to use plain language. This results in statements like must is the only word that imposes a legal obligation. But what about shall? We know shall from our international standards, and we use shall for obligation in our documentation. Let's look at this in more detail. Where does it come from? Well, it goes all the way back to the Old Testament, when the Bible was translated to English. You shall have no other gods before me. Is this an obligation? Humans possess free will, so we are given a choice. Our loving God gives us a choice. It's not a must. This is an interesting concept, and I looked at the Law Dictionary online, and they say, shall, as used in statutes and similar instruments, this word is generally imperative or mandatory, generally, but it may be construed as merely permissive or directory, as equivalent to may. Now, may is not must. May and must have two very different meanings. So what can we do? In the United States, we have the challenge. They say must is the only word for obligation, but we use shall. To avoid misunderstandings, define the exact meaning of shall in the glossary of terms of your document. Now, I'm not a lawyer. You must talk to your legal departments and find the exact wording they want to use. But my suggestion is define it in your documentation. This will avoid legal action from companies in Australia, New Zealand, United States, and many other parts of the world too. Okay, let's move on to according to and accordance with. According to is not the same as in accordance with. There's some links, you can check them. But let's give you an example. According to the weather reporter, it will rain later. It may or it may not rain later. But referring to what the weather reporter says, it will rain later. Take it or leave it. Now, in contrast, in accordance with the weather reporter, it will rain later. This means, in compliance with the weather reporter, it will rain later. This sentence is simply not possible today. The weather reporter does not have this power. Maybe in the future, in 30 or 40 years' time, the weather reporter will have the power to press a button, and in accordance with the weather reporter, it will rain later. We're not there yet. That may be a brave new world in the future. But please notice for now the difference between according to and in accordance with. Now, the next slide is about conditionals. Let's move on to conditionals and about using the word if. If you mean if, then please use if. I often see the phrase in case. The phrase in case is not a direct substitute for if. I access the Cambridge University website, and they say, we don't use in case to mean if. So if Cambridge don't use it, then we should not use it. Okay, they give us an example. Let's take our swimming costumes in case there's a pool at the hotel. Now, we don't know if there's a pool at the hotel, but we take our swimming costumes now in the present just in case there is a pool. Let's look at a more technical example. In case of high external temperatures, fans operate to maintain stable and safe operating conditions. Okay, so fans operate to maintain stable and safe operating conditions. They operate now, in the present, just in case of high external temperatures. That's what that sentence says. Fans operate all the time, continuously. This is a precaution. Was that the intention of the writer of this sentence? I think the writer meant fans only operate if there are high external temperatures. So completely different meanings. Please use if and not in case. What would Einstein say? Well, what did Einstein say? He said something, you can't explain it simply, you don't understand it well enough. Did he say, in case you can't explain it simply? Okay, some people use complicated language just in case someone discovers they don't really know what they're talking about and can't explain it simply. Or maybe they simply can't explain it. Now that's very hard. What Einstein actually said was, if you can't explain it simply, you don't understand it well enough. Please use if, as Einstein does. Do not use in case it's much too complicated for you, has many different meanings. Finally, let's check the grammar for the first and zero conditional. So the first conditional says, this is an event set in the future. B will happen. It's a promise, it's a fact. B will happen in the future if A occurs. This is an event set in the future. The zero conditional is a constant. B always happens if A occurs. This is out of time and space. This is a universal constant fact. So basically, the two statements have the same meaning, but the first conditional is set in the future. The good point here is that if you are writing about constants, you can use the present simple and you do not need to rewrite your documentation simply because it's a future event. Okay, that's basically it. Keep your sentences short and simple. Use language that has one single universal meaning and everyone understands the same thing. That's the basis of all this documentation. Keep it short and simple. Okay.